could be the work of some shady doctors or something.
No, you don't understand, child. And I will look at you, Roland. They all are gone.
What do you mean, all?
I mean, all.
He kind of sits back and frowns and says, "It's got to be some kind of wizard business, some horrible magics or grave eaters. It's been a while, but I've heard rumors that some of the other towns have been having problems with those carrion monsters."
Does anyone still have the missive in their hands?
Vertstad does.
Yep.
Would you mind? I hold my hand out.
Well, of course. I pass it.
I'm going to also read it over.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it aloud this time.
Okay. I was going to say.
I give you a dirty look when you reach for it. It's like, yes, let's all just read it silently in our heads and gloat above the halfling.
TLDR.
Your friend here, Roland.
TLDR, the church or the temple is burned to the ground. All the attendants are they don't know what happened. All the corpses are gone. Nobody was found alive. Everything was just razed completely.
I wanted to avoid shocking you, Master Wrist. I know that you do take a fright to things.
Heinrich almost turns a little red and goes, "As well he should! Right abominational act this was."
I'm sure it was Heinrich, but I don't think we should jump to conjecture.
Well, I mean, there was that creepy man with the cage head.
What?
Oh,
The creepy man with the cage head talking about a lady running around the woods with death following behind her.
Yes. That was an unpleasant event.
I think back to the employment letter. Mythical beasts indeed.
Heinrich pours himself a drink without commenting.
Does
I will
Djenneburg
lean...
have a center for magic at all? Like, is there anyone that helps protect the city magically?
I don't know. Do they?
I don't even know where to go to ask besides the freaking academy.
I mean, it's not like there's a local who is in your group.
I will ask this of you, Roland. Is there anyone that is in charge of this city, magically speaking?
Hey, that might help.
Roland, you're a little incredulous at even the question, because although you are aware of the fact that you are in the presence of wizards, it's still very odd. And to your understanding, if there were a witch or wizard that lived in Djenneburg, they probably would have been burned at the stake by now. So to your understanding, the only thing you even know of, the closest thing you know of, is the Rune Lord, who has been here in the last few months. He's probably the closest thing you can think of to being a wizard. Even though you know if you say that around any dwarves, it will immediately cause a brawl.
That's why I've thought of a better way to phrase it. I think the Rune Lord would know more than anyone else would.
Well, didn't I just suggest that we go find him? Not too long ago, I think. Wow, I'm getting those prophetic sights.
like the caged head guy.
But while I mean we, I mean you. And I will look to all three of you.
All right, well, I guess we have something we can ask around about while we wait to figure out what Hugo's up to.
All right, so y'all gonna head off to the academy.
In front of the academy.
Okay. As you make your way there, when it gets within sight, you can tell very obviously that Hugo is there because his rather garish and well outfitted carriage can be seen out front. The carriage driver sleeping in his seat, though you notice that he very strategically seems to have a hand wrapped around the large blunderbuss sitting across his lap. And you have the sneaking suspicion that he probably can wake up and fire that thing faster than you can throw a stick at him.
I will go right up to it.
Okay?
Good morning.
One of his eyes opens to like register the presence of the four of you, and then he immediately shuts it.
Is Lord Hugo around?
He the only gesture he gives is he very lazily looks he looks at you, and he very lazily kind of flicks his head towards the academy doors and then attempts to go back to sleep.
Well,
Shall I go
from
in
what...
to see how he's doing?
Sure, go right ahead.
I will hop and skip to the entrance of the academy.
All right. You enter the doors, and the first thing you see sitting at the nearest table is Hugo, happily sitting on one chair with his legs up on another chair, and there are piles of missives at the table next to him, and he just sort of is idly reading one. He signs it, passes it, stamps another one, passes it, and there's a occasional group of scholars that kind of come and go to remove the ones he's already signed, bring out new ones, and such.
I have a sneaking suspicion that everyone I know can read and I can't.
I mean, when you get back to camp, that won't be the case. But if you keep going to the place of learning, that's probably going to be the case.
I will stand in eyesight and await a moment to cough every now and then to allow him to recognize that I am there.
All right, it takes him a surprisingly long time with that method. Probably a good few minutes pass by before he finally sort of idly looks in your direction. Then he does a double take and he goes, "Oh, Master Wrist, you're back."
Hello, Hugo, me old friend.
He raises an eyebrow and he almost sort of gives a frown as he looks you up and down. He says, "You look different."
You know that folly of a hunt they're saying.
He chuckles and nods and says, "Well, seeing as I didn't have a big purse of gold crowns waiting for me, I can assume that it did not go particularly well."
I hear they're calling it a great failure, apparent as a giant herd of beastmen wandered through during a storm.
He nods and says, "Yes, I'm fairly certain that most everyone in the city is pretty convinced that it was a beastman all along, or one of their strange creatures."
Yeah, I lost me armor fighting in the woods and had to get myself some new ones.
He chuckles and says, "I could see that, though it's not quite what I was talking about. But anyway, where's the rest of your little party?"
Well, Verve is banned for scorching up the floor and being impolite. Vertstat is banned for being a deviant.
He sort of...
I'm the only one who's apparently allowed to walk in here, though I'm pretty sure some of those scribes are giving me dirty looks.
He turns and looks back at the scribes, and all of them immediately snap their eyes down back to their work and continue about their work. And Hugo laughs and slowly starts to stand up and says, "Well, I need to stretch my legs anyway. Let's go outside, shall we?"
So very kind of you, Hugo.
He follows you out, and the moment he lays eyes on Vertstat and Verve, he cheerily waves as he approaches, smoothing out his very rich robes with the fur collar and all sorts of trinkets and baubles over him. And when his eyes fall upon Roland, he kind of curiously, seeing how close he's standing to a lot of you, he says, "Ah, I see you hired a mercenary bodyguard."
Ah, Roland's me old friend. He saved me out in the woods. I did hear him say he wanted to become indirectly in under your employ.
Hugo gives you an appraising look and says, "Well, that should be fairly easy for such a monster. My goodness, my boy, where are you from?"
I'm local, actually. Near the docks.
He raises an eyebrow and says, "Really? Must be that eel diet I hear that some of them can get into down there."
Actually, I just tried eel for the first time yesterday. Sort of chuckle at him.
He smiles and says, "Well, I'm sure we can work something out once we get back to the camp in Hagerdorf. Now," and he turns immediately on Verve and he says, "I believe you have a horse I need to purchase."
Yes.
He
I believe the seller has been waiting most patiently.
He nods and says, "Good, let's not waste any time then." And he slaps one of his palms against the side of the carriage, and the driver immediately wakes and drops down to open the door. And he gestures and says, Come, let's be off now. Let's not waste any more time."
Thank you very much, Hugo. And I will hop in.
I will hop in as well.
Get in as well.
While
Alright,
describing
let's
how
go.
vicious and fierce this destrier is.
As speaking of which, I was informed by someone in the comment section I shouldn't call it destrier since it's female, but I can't remember what the proper word is for it. But I don't care. We'll just note that it's a female horse.
Destrier.
Sure. I don't think that's correct, but sure.
It's not.
But he gets into the wagon and gives the instructions on where to go after finding out from you, Verve. And as you start riding, he turns and says, "So, banned from the academy?" And he kind of wags his eyebrows up.
I will shrug. They were very rude. At what I am.
He chuckles and says, "Well, you can't expect everyone to have a normal reaction when some elf comes wandering in. Most of them don't even believe you exist."
Has Roland figured out she's an elf yet?
I don't
No.
think so.
Well, destrier actually doesn't refer to gender at all. They were more commonly stallions, but not
Whatever,
always.
it doesn't matter. Moving on.
The horse people will be upset.
One of your party members is an elf. That's all I care about right now. While I try and find a page I need.
But I will shrug again.
Did you know, Hugo, that this library, this academy, does not have one good dirty book section, and not one secret book section either?
He gives you kind of a particular look and he goes, It's academy, not a wizard's tower."
See?
First that
Wait.
shrug.
Wizards' towers have sections of dirty books.
He
No wonder the witch hunters are always after them.
he frowns and he goes, what do you mean by dirty? Are you trying to purchase books that have been ruined?"
Ah,
See, that is what I
apparently,
first thought.
From what I heard from the scribe, it wasn't really because of filth in a physical form. It was the ideas they described as being filthy.
He chuckles audibly and laughs a bit more, and he wipes at his eyes, says, "Oh, I can assure you, Vertstat, you can find such volumes if you'd like, tucked away in the library, but you're not going to find any willing scholar who's going to lead you to them."
Fair enough. I didn't expect the guards, though.
Well, I'm sure they weren't expecting some deviant to come in and ruin the sanctity of their personal space either. He does turn his attention to... he does kind of frown at the two of you, and he goes, I trust you two have been staying out of trouble then. Otto was most insistent that the two of you have a concerning aura about you.
Yes, aside from the getting banned, quote unquote, from the academy, then yes. I think they'd let me back in, if I'm being honest.
He nods slowly and kind of carefully watches the two of you, and then he turns to Roland and says, "What's your story, my dear boy? How did you meet my little do-gooders here?"
He was staring at us.
I was looking for a team for the hunt. At least to get more information on it. I thought they seemed capable. We went out into the woods. We actually found the thing, but it ran off.
Hugo raises an eyebrow and says, I'm sorry, you're saying the stag is real?
Oh, absolutely.
He
But it seemed just as timid as any deer you'd find.
he says,
Well, except for the gore dangling from its antlers. And the shredded remains of guns about where it was wandering about.
Yeah, but it seemed fine with us. Still not sure why. It bugs me.
Rist will point to himself. You have a charming halfling. No one hurts a halfling with any decency, except stupid goblins.
he leans back thoughtfully and says, well, that is curious, isn't it? In any event, and about this time y'all pull up outside the stables, and he goes, I'll be just a minute to secure the proposition. The four of you just wait here. And he
Sure thing, Hugo.
lunges himself out of the wagon and heads inside.
This is a nice carriage.
It is very nice. You're going to say goodbye to Roderick before we head out.
Roger.
Rist has a smile on his face that says he is up to no good.
After just a minute, Hugo comes out, and a few seconds after that, you see a couple of stable hands leading out the beast that you selected, Verve. And a few more negotiations go this way and that before it gets hitched up well enough to the wagon that they can reliably keep it following them. As Hugo pulls himself back in, he looks at you, Verve, and he gives you kind of a dangerous look, and he says, it's a rather curious pick there, Verve.
Well, I wrote it.
He chuckles and says, I think I'm beginning to see why the lad was so insistent on you being the selector. It's definitely not what I would have picked, I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, I didn't get to see you ride it very much, but I did see you fall very graciously from its back.
Well, there's that too. But I did write it. And it didn't bite my head off. And I will look at you, Wrist.
It's not my fault I look like the babies it wants to eat.
But he smirks down at you and he says, are you sure this stag the four of you encountered was really charmed by you in that sense? Perhaps it was already just full.
Maybe, but I did talk it to it down when we found it, and then it didn't charge. Pretty sure gonna level that at my charm.
He smirks and knocks on the roof, and the wagon begins moving. He does get a little bit more serious of a look on his face when he looks at you, Verve, and he goes, not that I care to repeat myself. I assure you I'm only asking in good faith, but I do want to be certain. Nothing happened I need to know about, correct?
Happened?
The
Besides
rats that
me...
were feasting on Verdstadt. Is that the kind of weird happening we're talking about? The Aksagi nations?
Uh, he gives you kind of a weird look, and he sits back and says, "No, quite then. I think you're unrelated. Well, that's good."
Besides the academy, I have done nothing ill.
There was those hooded, cloaked people wanting to see your face.
There was those, and the guy with the cage around his head, yes.
Hugo raises an eyebrow but doesn't comment.
Yeah, said they were looking for some female running around doing awful things.
Some weird figures, to say the least, but can't say that we've done anything.
He nods.
Besides the hunt, we have done nothing, and now we hear that the dead are being, or at least their corpses are being removed from graveyards. So it's probably a good time to get out of town.
I had Hugo the missive from earlier.
He takes it and looks it over, and his frown deepens, and he starts to tuck it away inside his jacket and says, "It will probably be wise to mention to Otto that some of the rumors I've been hearing may not be quite as fanciful as I had hoped."
Yeah, the cagehead guy said that there's a lady running around the Hager cribs with death following behind her.
He just frowns at you and he says, "Man in a cage?"
Yeah, he strapped some giant metal cage around his head.
Said we were all blind.
He rolls his eyes and says, "Sounds like some fanatic nonsense. Pay heed to the people who are aware of their senses, not some Sigmarite insane, I don't even know what to call them, flea-bitten madmen, the lots of them. I don't know why the church tolerates them."
But you did say something about a lady that was running around with death following her, but she had something familiar adorning her head, if I recall.
Was it also a cage?
It was a skull with antlers.
Hugo raises an eyebrow and he says, "Well, that does sound like someone we know."
Yeah, Frida.
He nods slowly and says, "I wouldn't put too much stock in it. I don't even know the last time Frida ever even came to this city. If she ever has."
I imagine I haven't heard of a weird lady with an antler
No,
hat.
you have no idea what they're talking about.
I'm sure if you stick with us long enough, you'll learn all about her.
Hugo gives you kind of a dangerous look and says, "Don't go starting trouble with her and the locals. Otto will have your head on a plate."
I wasn't the one that started it in the first place.
He
Are you
raises
sure?
he raises an eyebrow and says, "That's not what I heard."
I distinctly recall a wizard being blamed.
Well, there are two of us.
Hugo
Well, three with Otto in company.
Hugo leans back and rolls his eyes and says, "Regardless, it sounds like I should be returning to Hagerdorf sooner rather than later, but I need to take you with me if you are to have any hopes of making it back, especially with all the reports of beastmen about. So, when are you ready to go?"
I'm ready to go now. I'd like to be gone before all the witch hunters come.
I am also ready to go now.
Sounds good to me.
I will shrug.
He nods and says, "Well, if you have no further business, then we'll..."
Oh, could we stop by this one place? I need to see if they've finished my breastplate. That is one bit of business I have.
He nods and says, "Tell you what, I need to wrap up my things at the academy. I'll drop you off wherever it is you need to go, and you lot can just meet me there when you're ready."
Sounds great. Thanks for being so accommodating, Hugo.
He nods and says, "Well, thank you for being ready to go quickly. It sounds like we might need to... Well, it sounds like Hagerdorf may need to prepare for some troubling times." With that, he follows your instructions wrist and he drops you off at the smithy.
Oh, hello there. Did you ever finish that little task I had for you?
The man whose name I can't remember looks down at you and goes, "I finished it. You have the rest of my payment."
Oh, of course I do. And I hand him the 4 crowns that I owe him.
Okay. He looks them over, bites one of them, nods, and then he gets up and heads back to a not a bar, but a table built into the wall that has various cloths lying on it. Raises one up and pulls out a small, finely made breastplate and walks over and he holds it up in front of you and kind of squints just to be sure, and then nods and hands it to you.
Oh, thank you very much. It looks like fine work, and I will put it on.
All right, it's a good fit.
I get partway through putting it on and wince and go, Roderick, can you help me with this? Blasted bruise is giving me a pain. So not Roderick, Roland.
Yeah, Roderick can't help you.
But he'd be so good at helping me.
Probably.
But yes, as long as it fits properly, I will thank him and leave.
It does. Though I will note, if you're wearing the leather jack and the breastplate, it does make your chest hurt quite a bit, at least right now.
I am about to go on a carriage through the Reichwald. I am wearing both.
Fair enough. All right. Do y'all have any other stops you want to make before you head to the academy one last time?
Nope.
I'm good, I think.
All right. You did everybody pay Heinrich for the last night, by the way?
I think I need to pay him. How much was it?
It was 5 brass.
Okay.
I paid him by working.
Okay. All right. You make your way back to the academy, and as you approach, you see the carriages out, and you see Hugo leaning out the window towards the academy, talking, but you can't see who he's talking to, as you are on the other side of the carriage, and you do not see anyone through the window. It looks like he's talking to air.
I go around the other side.
All right. As you do, Verve, you feel almost a static charge in the air, and you look and see that there is a dwarf, a very familiar dwarf, standing not quite high enough, even with his anvil-designed helmet, to reach above, up to where the window is, and his
I scowl immediately.
his icy gaze falls over you, and his mouth closes. And Hugo looks over and sees you. Alarmed. He looks alarmed at first, but when he sees you, his face changes to bemused and says, "Ah, I could tell you've already met."
Too many times for my liking, yes.
Coming around the carriage, I go, Roderick Stoneshaper! It's great to see you before we leave.
It is.
He lets out a low rumble, but does not comment. And Hugo looks back at the rest of you and says, "Are you ready to leave then?"
As I'll ever be.
I believe
will
so.
not.
He looks at you, Roland, as you're getting in and says, "Have you ever been to the Hager Cribs, lad?"
Just around the foothills where the hunt took us.
He nods and says, "Oh, they're charming, really. Should be a fun trip."
I look at Hugo in disbelief.
As everything gets ready for the four of you to leave, Hugo does look at Roderick, who has just kind of been standing there quietly, and Roderick looks at you, Vertstat, and you feel like he is gazing into your very soul. Like there is way too much in that look. And Hugo kind of follows his gaze and looks at you, and his smile kind of fades, but no one says anything, and then Hugo sort of shakes and knocks on the roof, and the carriage begins heading off.
I will wave goodbye to Roderick. I hope I did a good enough job for you.
He does not wave.
I will
That's
try
fine.
not to look at him.
He's waving internally. I can tell.
Oh, I'm sure. But you make your way through the streets of Djenneburg without any issue as the sun crosses the zenith of its ascent and begins the slow descent on the other into the west. And as the road goes from hardened stone to deeply packed earth, you make your way out east across the farmlands until you start heading up into the proper forest path. And as you head up into the darker forest itself, Hugo looks at the four of you and says, "Well, this has been interesting, if nothing else. I'm glad to hear that the four of you are in relatively good shape. I do hope you're ready to get back to work coming off this vacation."
Vacation?
It was
are
a
you-
lovely vacation.
I will look at you, wrist, and just blink and open up my mouth to say something and then close it.
Do you recall what we did when we were unworking? Burning down half the Reichwald and charging at demonic bears.
Hugo does frown at the mention of the burning and says, "I do hope you will remember your job is to locate particular trees, not to destroy all of them."
Yes, I didn't intend to, but in Vertstadt's defense, we weren't hired then. We were just on our way.
That's true.
Hugo nods and says, fair enough, fair enough. Well, in any event, and as you're making your way through the forest, you begin heading up into the sort of familiar grounds, and you pass by a very familiar spot where you encountered the spiders for the first time. And as you cross that little ravine and keep heading up, you see the peaks getting closer and closer, and you head further uphill. Those of you who have the ability to sense magic... One sec. I need you to roll a intuition check. Oh my gosh. Okay. As you start heading and you start getting much closer to where Hagerdorf is, you've been driving for a good about 2 hours now. After you hit the edge of the forest, Verve, you don't really notice it at first, but your skin begins to get goosebumps, and you feel something prickling at the back of your neck. And as you continue to ride up towards Hagerdorf, you smell... It smells like a sweet, rotting perfume on the wind, and it's heavy. And as the smell grows and you begin to feel a light headache coming on, the next time you see yourself looking out the window, everything, all the trees, the very light, the ground, the earth, the vines, the leaves, everything looks vaguely purple to you. And as you continue heading up and it starts hitting the late afternoon, both of you roll another intuition check. Also, everyone except the wizards roll a perception check. For this intuition, you're at plus 20, by the way.
Okay, so I would have passed by one.
Okay. Okay. Roll. Okay, wow. Damn, Verve. Alright, so... Vertstadt, you notice there's a purple haze, and you begin to smell the odor. Verve, when you look out on the forest, you begin to see things. Every time you look at the trees, whenever there's a shadow, you feel like you see in every like hole in a tree, you feel like you see there's a skull there, or you think you see spines hanging down only for you to blink and they're actually just vines, or you see the ground stirring as if something's moving underneath, but when you actually focus on it, it's not moving at all. And Roland, as you're heading up into the Hager Cribs, you've heard a lot about the Hager Cribs, and even talking to your companions here, you find it really odd that none of them seem to notice how death everything looks. As you're riding up, despite the fact you're in like in the early season of fall, you're not really that far into fall yet, but like the trees are almost white. Like they almost look like they've been petrified. Many of them. Some of them it's not complete, and some of them it's not super noticeable, but everywhere you look, you feel like your gaze is drawn to some sign of that everything here is sick.
I will look at you, Verstat, and say, Shaish, it's... I've never felt this place be so drawn to it before. How long were we gone?
Hugo looks absentmindedly at you and says, "Oh, we've only been out for maybe a little less than a week. 6 days, give or take."
This
I've
place
just-
is...
You can continue.
This place is just permeated in it, Hugo.
Hugo looks confused.
The wind of death. It is everywhere. It is thick. It's...
He just looks out the window, and after you continue to pass by some more trees, and he kind of frowns a little bit, and he says, "I'm sure it's just an early fall setting in."
No.
Wind of death. Is that some kind of saying? Because I can feel something. I've never been out this far before.
I will look over at you, Verstat, and say, you see it, right? Tell me I'm not losing my mind.
You're not losing my mind, but it's not as extreme as you're making it out to be, and as far as I can tell.
You crest over, after a good bit more driving, you crest over the last of the major upper hills. You're now among the actual proper Hager Creek peaks themselves, before you descend down into the valley where Hagerdorf rests. And the driver, you all of you feel the carriage slowly pull to a stop. And Hugo gets kind of a queer look on his face before leaning out the window and looking towards the driver. And he pauses, and he kind of comes back in, and he sits and he frowns. And he looks at you, Verve, and he says, "Could you elaborate?"
The wind of Shaish, it's the wind of death. And it is so thick here that I can barely breathe.
The wind of death, what's that mean?
It is the magical wind of death. Literally.
Hugo leans again out the window and says, if you'd be so kind, he gestures at the back of the wagon and says, all the bags there will be going with you. They have the proper papers, and take the horse. But I think you can walk the rest of the way. We're close enough. You could see the camp from here.
Yes, I understand your wanting to get out of here. I step outside as quickly as I can.
Okay. As all of you step out, and your eyes are very quickly drawn towards the camp outside Hagerdorf, where the Bloody Hounds and Otto and everyone lives. And the first thing that catches your very obvious attention is a set of big black plumes of smoke, and plumes, And as you look down at the source, you see a small piles of bodies that are burning, that people are gathering and throwing onto there. The camp seems functional, but it looks quiet. And there is a really sickly smell on the actual wind as it blows from the camps towards the lot of you.
Oh, I thought I smelled this smell a while back.
Verve, is this worse than witch hunters?
Way worse than witch hunters.
I'm going to take my axe out.
Why don't
I
you
look
gather
behind
up?
me.
Why don't you gather up the sacks, boys?
And look longingly at Hugo's cart.
Verstat will begin taking some of the bags.
I will go to the horse.
All right.
I get nowhere near there until the horse is away from the bags.
The horse does seem extremely nervous. And you notice the horses pulling the carriage also seem very nervous. They're very quiet. Their ears are pressed back. They seem very uncomfortable.
But I'll basically go up to it and be like, you're a mighty beast. You can't be fearful of some smell.
I'm sure if it could respond, it would tell you to go fuck yourself. Get real. The beast does seem to tolerate your presence, though, and it does not fight when you pull the straps connecting it to the cart off. It does take some coaxing, though, to get it to start heading towards the town. Or the camp.
Alright, now that it's safe, I go and help unload bags.
Alright, you get everything off. Among your little group, you are easily capable of carrying everything back. And Hugo leans out the window as the four of you prepare to head off. And he looks and says, well, best of luck to you, lady, gentlemen. I do hope we'll meet again soon, though under better circumstances. Stay safe.
Of course, Hugo. You as well.
Perhaps tell Djenneburg to tighten itself up.
He frowns, he looks beyond and says, I'll pass on some warnings, but I think I'm due in Altdorf for some business soon.
Oh, my sister works in Altdorf. Great place, she says.
He nods and says, well, if I run into any Fumblefoots, I'll let them know you say hello.
Alright, don't let her teach you, though.
He nods to the four of you and leans back in his cart, and the driver snaps and it starts to pull away. And with that fun little cliffhanger, we're done.
Alright. It was a good session, man. I got new robes.
Yep, everybody get 25 experience.
Okay.
And that concludes this episode of Everyone Bullies Verstat.
No one's letting me forget that.